The Galactic Council had existed for over 3,000 standard years, governing 47 different species across 12 spiral arms of the galaxy. In all that time, they had never encountered anything quite like the humans. The first reports came from the Outer Rim territories, where mining operations had discovered unusual energy signatures on a small blue planet in what the locals called the Sol System. Initial scans showed primitive life forms engaged in constant warfare, using crude chemical explosives and metal projectiles. The Council's xenobiologists classified them as a Level 2 civilization, barely capable of interplanetary travel, certainly not worth worrying about. Admiral Zefex of the Korthani Empire reviewed the reports with mild interest. The Korthani were among the most militaristic species in the Council, having conquered 17 systems through superior technology and tactical brilliance. Their crystalline exoskeletons could withstand plasma fire, and their forearms made them devastating in combat. Yet even they had learned to respect the Council's authority. These humans, Zefex clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. They seemed to fight constantly, even among their own kind. His aide, a nervous Veltran with large compound eyes, nodded rapidly. Yes, Admiral. They've had over 300 major conflicts in just the last 1,000 rotations of their planet. They use kinetic weapons, actual metal projectiles fired by explosive charges. Zefex found this amusing. The galaxy had moved beyond such primitive warfare millennia ago. Energy shields made kinetic weapons obsolete, and civilized species settled disputes through the Council's mediation protocols. What is their population? He asked. Nearly 8 billion, sir. All crammed onto a single world. They show no signs of developing faster than light travel within the next several centuries. The Admiral filed the report away. Primitive species came and went. Most destroyed themselves before achieving interstellar capability. Those that survived usually petitioned for Council membership within a few generations of their first contact. The humans would either wipe themselves out or eventually join the galactic community like everyone else. But, as years passed, the reports grew more disturbing. The humans had not destroyed themselves. Instead, they had somehow achieved space flight much faster than predicted. Crude, chemical-powered rockets had given way to fusion engines. Then, something the Council's scientists couldn't immediately identify. Human vessels began appearing in nearby systems, establishing colonies on worlds that should have been uninhabitable to their physiology. Dr. Yillith, the Council's chief xenobiologist, presented her findings to the emergency session with growing concern. Her tentacles writhed nervously as she spoke. Honored Council members, the humans are unlike any species we've encountered. They adapt to environments that would kill most of us. We've observed colonies thriving on worlds with gravity 3 times their home planet's norm, in temperatures ranging from sub-zero to scorching. They seem to modify themselves to survive anywhere. Counselor Threx, an ancient being whose species had been among the Council's founders, leaned forward with interest. You mean they use genetic manipulation? Not exactly. Dr. Yillith's voice carried a note of unease. They use tools, modifications to their environment, and something we can only call determination. They've established mining operations in the corona of their star. They've built habitats in the vacuum of space that somehow maintain Earth-normal conditions. And they do it all with technology that should be generations away from their current development level. The Council chamber fell silent. Species typically followed predictable patterns of development. Technology advanced in logical steps, guided by physical laws and resource limitations. The humans seem to be skipping steps entirely. There's something else, Dr. Yillith continued. They've begun sending what they call exploration vessels toward Council territory. Long-range sensors indicate these ships carry weapons. This news sent a ripple of concern through the chamber. New species were supposed to be contacted and evaluated before venturing beyond their home systems. The humans hadn't waited for an invitation. Counselor Threx's ancient voice carried the weight of centuries. Have we attempted contact? Yes, honored Counselor. We sent a standard first contact probe to their home system 3 rotations ago. They captured it. The chamber erupted in surprised chattering from dozens of different species. First contact probes were designed to be obviously artificial and peaceful, equipped with universal translation matrices and cultural exchange protocols. Capturing one was unprecedented. Did they attempt to communicate through the probe? Asked Admiral Zefex, who had been following the human situation with growing unease. No, sir. They took it apart. The silence that followed was profound. Species examined Council technology, certainly, but only after establishing diplomatic relations. The humans had treated the probe like a specimen to be dissected. Counselor Threx made the decision that would haunt the galaxy for generations to come. Initiate quarantine protocols. Establish a perimeter around the Sol system. These humans are not ready for contact. We will wait for them to achieve proper civilization. The Council voted unanimously. A network of automated defense stations was deployed around human space, equipped with the standard deterrent systems used to protect developing species from outside interference. The stations were programmed to disable any vessel that attempted to leave the designated quarantine zone. But there was one thing the Council's engineers included in every defense network, a failsafe that had never been used in 3,000 years of galactic peace. Hidden deep in each station's core was a single red button, protected by multiple security protocols and warning systems in every known language. The Forbidden Button. It was designed as a last resort, a way to call for immediate military intervention if a quarantined species somehow posed an existential threat to galactic civilization. The Council's military doctrine stated that such a threat was theoretically impossible. No single system could challenge the combined might of 47 spacefaring civilizations. The humans, of course, had not read the Council's military doctrine. Within 5 years of the quarantine's establishment, human vessels began testing the perimeter. They approached the defense stations with what appeared to be scientific curiosity, scanning and probing without attacking. The station's automated systems performed perfectly, disabling the human ships and allowing rescue vessels to retrieve the crews. But each attempt taught the humans more about Council technology. The breakthrough came when a human vessel appeared at Defense Station 7 carrying something impossible, weapons that completely bypassed energy shields. The station's automated distress call was brief. Unknown weapon type detected. Energy barriers ineffective. Station 7 offline. In the Council's monitoring center, a technician named Korvax stared at his instruments in disbelief. His 6 eyes focused on the readings that made no sense. Defense Station 7 had been destroyed, not disabled. The humans had somehow learned to build weapons that could penetrate shields that had protected the galaxy for millennia. As more stations fell silent, Korvax's training took over. He reached for the emergency panel, his hand hovering over the single red button that would change everything. He had no way of knowing that in destroying the defense stations, the humans had discovered the Council's existence. They had decoded the station's data cores and learned about the 47 species that had kept them trapped in their home system. Korvax pressed the button. The moment Korvax's finger pressed the forbidden button, alarms began screaming across 47 different worlds. Military commanders who had been enjoying peaceful careers suddenly found themselves staring at threat assessments they had never expected to see. The button had only one purpose: to signal that a quarantined species had become an immediate danger to galactic civilization. Admiral Zefex received the alert while reviewing routine patrol reports. His forearms moved with practiced efficiency as he pulled up the threat analysis, expecting to see some sort of technical malfunction. No quarantined species had ever warranted military intervention. The defense stations were specifically designed to handle any conceivable threat from a single system civilization. What he saw made his exoskeleton turn a pale shade of blue. "Impossible," he whispered, his mandibles clicking frantically as he processed the data. 23 defense stations had gone dark in the span of 6 hours. The remaining stations were transmitting weapon signatures that matched nothing in the Council's extensive database. His aide rushed into the command center, compound eyes wide with panic. "Admiral, we're receiving priority communications from the Inner Council. Fleet mobilization orders are being transmitted across all sectors." Admiral Zefex had commanded fleets through the Hegrix Rebellion and the Silicon Wars, but he had never seen a mobilization order that included every species in the Council. The document scrolling across his display requested immediate deployment of all available military assets to the Sol system perimeter. "How many ships?" he asked, though he dreaded the answer. "All of them, sir. The Inner Council is authorizing the largest fleet in galactic history. 47 species, 12,000 vessels, and the aide's voice faltered. They're authorizing use of planet-killer weapons. Planet killers were weapons of absolute last resort, designed to crack worlds open from core to surface. They had been used exactly twice in galactic history, both times against planets that had fallen to the Devourer plague. The authorization meant the Council considered the humans an extinction-level threat. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out on worlds whose names humans had never heard. The Keltharian hegemony dispatched their massive bioships, living vessels that could adapt their weapons in real time. The Synthetic Collective sent geometric dreadnoughts that computed optimal battle strategies faster than organic minds could think. The Void Dancers emerged from their hidden dimensions, bringing weapons that existed in 17 different spatial planes simultaneously. But while the galaxy's greatest military minds planned their assault, they failed to consider one crucial factor. Humans had been watching. Dr. Sarah Chun stood in the command center of Outpost Defiance, humanity's first permanent installation beyond the solar system. The station had been built from the wreckage of Defense Station 7, incorporating both human engineering and captured alien technology. Around her, dozens of technicians monitored displays showing the entire galaxy lighting up with military activity. "How many ships are they sending?" asked General Marcus Rivera, the grizzled veteran who commanded humanity's outer system defenses. "Conservative estimate? 10,000, Sarah replied, adjusting her glasses as she reviewed the intercepts. "More realistic number? Everything they have." The general nodded grimly. Humanity had suspected they weren't alone in the universe, but discovering they had been quarantined like dangerous animals had come as a shock. The destruction of the defense stations had been necessary to break free, but it had apparently triggered something the aliens called a galactic emergency. "Are we ready?" he asked. Sarah looked around the command center at the faces of men and women who had spent 5 years preparing for this moment. They had reverse-engineered alien technology, developed new weapons systems, and created strategies based on everything they could learn about galactic civilization. "As ready as we can be," she said. "Project Prometheus is online. All colony worlds are equipped with the new defense systems, and the Pandora fleet is standing by." The Pandora fleet was humanity's secret weapon, built in the outer reaches of the solar system where alien sensors couldn't detect them. Each ship incorporated lessons learned from captured Council technology, but with uniquely human modifications. Where alien vessels relied on energy shields, human ships used ablative armor and redundant systems. Where alien weapons focused on elegant energy projections, human weapons threw kinetic projectiles at relativistic speeds. But humanity's greatest advantage wasn't technological. It was philosophical. The galactic species had lived in peace for 3,000 years. They had forgotten what war really meant. Their weapons were designed for decisive battles against civilized opponents who followed the same rules of engagement. Their strategies assumed rational actors who would surrender when faced with superior firepower. Humans had never stopped fighting. Even during the brief period of global peace before achieving spaceflight, they had continued to develop new ways of killing each other. War wasn't just something humans did. It was something they excelled at with disturbing creativity. As the galactic fleet assembled at the rally point in the Centauri system, Admiral Zefex reviewed intelligence reports about human capabilities. The data was frustratingly incomplete. Human vessels appeared to be crude constructions of metal and ceramics, propelled by fusion rockets that should have been no match for Council gravitic drives. Their weapons seemed to be variations on the same kinetic principles they had used on their homeworld. "Sir," his aide announced, "the fleet is reporting ready for combat operations. Shall I transmit the ultimatum?" Standard Council doctrine required offering surrender terms before engaging a hostile force. Zefex nodded, and moments later, a message was broadcast toward Earth on all frequencies, translated into the mathematical languages that any technological species should understand. The message was simple: surrender immediately or face total annihilation. The human response came 12 hours later, not through radio waves, but through action. Long-range sensors detected vessels emerging from the Sol system, moving at speeds that should have been impossible for chemical rockets. "How many ships?" Admiral Zefex asked, studying the tactical display. 200, sir. Relatively small vessels, probably scout class. Shall we intercept? Zefex considered the tactical situation. 12,000 council vessels against 200 human ships. The humans were either insane or had some trick he couldn't see. Deploy the forward screen. Standard battle formation. We'll engage at long range and avoid any surprises they might have prepared. The Council fleet moved into position with the precision of a force that had drilled these maneuvers for centuries. Energy weapons powered up, shields strengthened to maximum capacity, and targeting systems locked onto the approaching human vessels. What happened next would be debated in military academies for generations. The human ships didn't slow down. Instead of decelerating to engage at normal combat ranges, they accelerated directly toward the Council line. Their fusion drives pushed them to velocities that should have liquefied any crew, yet somehow they maintained perfect formation. "They're not slowing down," reported the tactical officer, confusion evident in his voice. "Sir, at their current speed, they'll reach our lines in 14 minutes. Admiral Zefex felt the first stirring of unease. No civilized species engaged in suicide runs. Space combat was supposed to be conducted at safe distances, with precise weapon exchanges and minimal casualties. "Perhaps they're attempting to ram our vessels," suggested his aide. "Should we adjust formation to minimize damage?" "Negative. Maintain current position. Their ships are too small to seriously damage our dreadnoughts, even at those speeds." The admiral was wrong. As the human vessels approached firing range, they didn't target the massive dreadnoughts at the fleet center. Instead, they launched thousands of tiny objects that spread out in a cone pattern, each one smaller than a fighter craft but moving at significant fractions of light speed. "Incoming projectiles," the tactical officer announced. "Estimated impact in 30 seconds. "Sir, they're not using energy weapons at all. These appear to be solid masses." Admiral Zefex watched in growing horror as his instruments calculated the kinetic energy of the incoming barrage. Each projectile carried more destructive force than a plasma torpedo, and there were thousands of them. Evasive maneuvers. All ships, scatter formation. But Council vessels were designed for elegant, predictable combat. Their massive size and sophisticated systems made them powerful but slow to change direction. The kinetic barrage struck the fleet like hammers hitting glass. Ships that had weathered the fires of stellar warfare cracked open under impacts that bypassed their energy shields entirely. The beautiful geometric formations dissolved into chaos as vessels tumbled out of control, their gravitic drives failing and life support systems compromised. In the space of 5 minutes, the largest military fleet in galactic history lost 60% of its strength to weapons that wouldn't have seemed out of place in humanity's ancient wars. Admiral Zefex stared at his tactical display in shocked silence as damage reports flooded the command center. His aide was babbling something about impossible physics and obsolete technology, but the admiral's attention was fixed on a new development. The 200 human vessels were turning around. They weren't continuing their attack. They weren't demanding surrender. They were simply leaving, as if this devastating assault had been nothing more than a casual demonstration of their capabilities. A priority communication came through from one of the human ships, broadcast on Council emergency frequencies. The translation matrix struggled with the unusual syntax, but the message was clear enough. This was a warning. "Next time we won't hold back." The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in absolute chaos. Representatives from 47 species filled the ancient chamber, their voices creating a cacophony of fear, anger, and confusion that the translation system struggled to process. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Council faced an enemy they didn't understand. Councillor Threx called for order with the authority of his extreme age, but even his ancient voice carried notes of uncertainty. Around the chamber, holographic displays showed the devastating aftermath of humanity's warning shot. The pride of the galactic fleet floated in space as twisted wreckage, while the survivors struggled to comprehend how their superior technology had failed so completely. "The humans used kinetic weapons," reported Dr. Yillith, her tentacles writhing with agitation. "Solid projectiles accelerated to relativistic speeds. Our energy shields are designed to deflect plasma and particle beams, not physical impacts at those velocities." Admiral Zephex stood to address the council, his crystalline exoskeleton still bearing scorch marks from his flagship's emergency evacuation. Honored members, we face an adversary unlike any in recorded history. They don't follow conventional tactical doctrine. They don't use standard weapons. They don't even seem to care about their own casualties. This last point troubled the council more than any tactical analysis. Galactic civilization had evolved beyond the concept of acceptable losses. Wars were fought with precision, minimizing damage to infrastructure and population. The idea of species willing to sacrifice themselves for strategic advantage was alien to most council members. "What are their demands?" asked Representative Quillex of the Traitor Coalition, her three heads speaking in harmony. "Surely they want something. Territory, resources, representation in the council?" Admiral Zephex's mandibles clicked nervously. "They haven't made any demands, Representative. After the engagement, they simply left." The chamber fell silent. Species conquered territory, sought resources, demanded tribute. They didn't launch devastating attacks, and then withdraw without claiming victory or stating objectives. The human behavior pattern matched no known psychological profile. "Perhaps they're regrouping for a larger assault," suggested Commander Vex of the warrior clans, his fur bristling with anticipation. "My people volunteer to lead a counterattack while they're still consolidating." Dr. Yillith's research display activated, showing recent intelligence gathered from long-range sensors. "I'm afraid the situation is more complex than that, Commander. Our monitoring stations have detected massive construction activity throughout human space. They're not regrouping, they're expanding." The holographic display showed the Sol system transformed beyond recognition. Where once a single populated world had orbited a yellow star, now massive structures ringed every planet and moon. Asteroid belts had been converted into construction yards. The star itself was partially enclosed by what appeared to be energy collection arrays on a scale that dwarfed anything in galactic civilization. "This construction began before our fleet arrived," Dr. Yillith continued. "They weren't preparing for our attack. They were preparing for something much larger." Counselor Threx leaned forward, his ancient eyes studying the intelligence data with growing alarm. "How is this level of construction possible? The energy requirements alone should exceed the output of their entire system." "They've harnessed their star directly," Dr. Yillith replied. "Our physicists are calling it a Type 2 civilization transition. They're extracting energy from stellar sources at near-theoretical maximum efficiency." The implications hit the Council like a physical blow. The classification system used to rank species' technological development placed most galactic civilizations at Type 1, capable of using all energy available on their homeworld. Type 2 civilizations were theoretical constructs, capable of harnessing the entire energy output of their star. Humans had apparently achieved this transition in the 5 years since the quarantine began. "Show us the fleet analysis," Admiral Zephex demanded, his voice tight with professional dread. The display shifted to show human vessel formations around the outer planets. What the Council saw defied everything they thought they knew about spacecraft engineering. Human ships were massive beyond belief, some approaching the size of small moons. They moved in formations of hundreds, with new vessels being constructed even as the analysis was conducted. Conservative estimates placed their current fleet strength at 50,000 vessels, Dr. Yillith reported. But the construction rate suggests they could field 10 times that number within a standard year. Representative Quillex's three heads conferred among themselves before speaking. "This is impossible. No single system can support that level of industrial production. Where are they getting the raw materials?" "They're mining other star systems," came the horrifying answer. "Our perimeter sensors have detected human operations in 17 nearby systems. They're strip mining entire worlds and transporting the materials back to Sol using some sort of faster-than-light cargo system we can't identify." The chamber erupted in panicked discussions. Strip mining entire worlds violated every principle of galactic civilization. The Council had spent millennia developing sustainable extraction methods that preserved planetary ecosystems. The humans were treating entire worlds like raw resources to be consumed. Commander Vex stood, his warrior instincts overriding diplomatic protocol. "Then, we stop them now, before they become unstoppable. Deploy every fleet, every weapon." sterilize their entire system before they can expand further. With what? Admiral Zefex's bitter laughter silenced the chamber. Our largest fleet was just crippled by 200 of their scout vessels. They have 50,000 ships and industrial capacity we can't match. A direct assault would be suicide. Counselor Threx raised one ancient hand for silence. There may be another option. Dr. Yillith, have we detected any weaknesses in their expansion pattern? The xenobiologist's display showed human activity spreading outward from Sol in an expanding sphere. Red dots indicated confirmed human colonies, while yellow markers showed suspected construction sites. They're expanding rapidly, but not randomly, she reported. They seem to be targeting systems with specific resource profiles, heavy metals, rare isotopes, and unusually high-energy stellar output. If we could predict their next targets, we could set a trap, finished Admiral Zefex, his tactical mind already working on the problem. Concentrate our remaining forces in a system they'll want to attack. Force them into a battle on our terms. The plan that emerged from the emergency session was desperate, but potentially effective. Intelligence suggested the humans would target the Kepler 442 system within months. It contained multiple worlds rich in the rare elements their construction projects required. The Council would evacuate the system's population and establish a massive defensive network, using every weapon and tactic they could devise. But, as the Council planned their trap, they failed to consider one crucial factor. Humans had been intercepting their communications since the destruction of the first defense station. Deep in the bowels of Outpost Defiance, Dr. Sarah Chun reviewed the intercepted Council transmissions with grim satisfaction. The aliens had done exactly what human strategists predicted they would do: retreat to a defensive position and hope to fight on favorable terms. They're concentrating everything in Kepler 442, she reported to General Rivera, who was studying holographic displays showing the Council's military preparations. 7,000 ships, planetary defense platforms, and what our analysts think are some sort of superweapons. The general nodded thoughtfully. Classic fortress mentality. They're thinking like armies, not like guerrilla fighters. How long until our special project is ready? Sarah consulted her tablet, reviewing progress reports from the most classified project in human space. Project Damocles will be operational in 6 weeks. But, General, using it means crossing a line we can't come back from. General Rivera's expression hardened. They quarantined us like animals, then tried to wipe us out when we broke free. They've made it clear there's no room in their galaxy for an independent humanity. Maybe it's time they learned what happens when you corner a predator. Project Damocles was the culmination of everything humans had learned about galactic civilization's weaknesses. While the aliens had spent millennia perfecting energy weapons and defensive shields, they had neglected the most fundamental aspect of interstellar warfare: logistics. Every galactic civilization depended on faster-than-light communication networks to coordinate their vast empires. These networks used quantum entanglement relays positioned at strategic points throughout the galaxy, allowing instantaneous communication across thousands of light years. The humans had discovered how to disrupt those networks. Initiate Phase 1, General Rivera commanded. Target the relay stations in the Outer Rim territories. Let's see how well their empire functions when the left hand can't talk to the right. Across the galaxy, human stealth vessels emerged from hyperspace near quantum relay stations that had operated undisturbed for centuries. The attacks were swift and surgical, not destroying the stations, but introducing viruses into their quantum matrices that would spread through the entire network. Within hours, the galactic communication grid began experiencing random failures. Messages arrived garbled or delayed. Military coordination became increasingly difficult. Trade networks that depended on instantaneous confirmation of transactions started to collapse. The Council attributed the failures to stress damage from their massive fleet mobilization. They had no idea that humanity was systematically dismantling the infrastructure that held their civilization together. As Admiral Zefex prepared his forces for the battle at Kepler 442, he received a final intelligence update that made his exoskeleton pale to nearly transparent. "Sir," his aide reported, voice shaking with disbelief, "long-range sensors have detected a human fleet moving toward our position. Estimated strength, 100,000 vessels. The admiral stared at the tactical display, showing an armada that dwarfed anything in galactic history. The humans weren't just coming to fight. They were coming to end the war permanently. Signal the council, he ordered quietly. Tell them we may have made a terrible mistake. But, by then, the quantum communication network was failing across 17 sectors, and his message would never arrive. The Battle of Kepler 442 began not with the thunderous exchange of energy weapons that Council strategists had planned, but with silence. The massive defensive network they had constructed around the system's primary world simply stopped responding to commands. Orbital platforms that had taken months to position went dark. Communication arrays that should have coordinated the defense fell silent one by one. Admiral Zefex stood in his command center, watching his carefully planned fortress crumble without a shot being fired. His instruments showed no incoming fire, no energy signatures that would indicate an attack. The defensive systems were simply failing, as if some invisible plague was spreading through their technology. "Sir," his aide reported, voice tight with barely controlled panic, "we're losing connection with the outer defense ring. The quantum relays are showing massive synchronization errors." The Admiral's forearms moved frantically across his control surfaces, trying to re-establish contact with units that should have been responding instantly. The beautiful tactical display that had shown 7,000 vessels arranged in perfect defensive formations now showed mostly empty space, with scattered units operating independently. "How many ships do we still have contact with?" he asked. "Approximately 1,500, sir. All others have gone to local command protocols." 1,500 ships from a force of 7,000. In the space of 6 hours, without firing a single shot, the humans had reduced the Council's strongest defensive position to scattered fragments of a once mighty fleet. But Admiral Zefex was a veteran of 17 campaigns, and he had not survived this long by surrendering when things looked impossible. He activated the emergency broadcast system, sending orders on all frequencies to every vessel that could still receive them. "All ships, implement Directive 7. Autonomous combat protocols are now in effect. Engage any human vessels on sight. Show them that the Council dies fighting." Directive 7 was the Council's last resort, complete abandonment of centralized command in favor of individual ship actions. It had never been used in actual combat, but simulations suggested it could be effective against overwhelming odds. The humans, however, had not come to fight a conventional battle. The first sign of their arrival was gravitational. Sensors throughout the system registered massive spatial distortions as something enormous dropped out of hyperspace at the system's edge. Then another. Then dozens more, until space itself seemed to ripple with the presence of objects so massive they warped local physics. Admiral Zefex stared at his long-range displays in disbelief. The human fleet wasn't just large, it was incomprehensible. Ships the size of asteroids moved in formations that stretched across millions of kilometers. Some vessels were so massive that they generated their own gravitational fields, pulling debris and smaller craft into orbital patterns around their hulls. "How many?" he whispered. "Sensors can't get an accurate count, sir. The gravitational interference is too severe. Estimate ranges from 80,000 to over 100,000 vessels." But numbers weren't the most terrifying thing about the human fleet. It was their obvious intent. The massive ships weren't moving to engage the scattered Council forces. Instead, they were positioning themselves around Kepler 442's star, deploying structures that defied easy categorization. Huge metallic frameworks unfolded like flowers, positioning themselves at specific points around the stellar sphere. Dr. Yillith, monitoring the situation from the scientific vessel Harmony of Thought, realized what she was seeing moments before her instruments confirmed the impossible. "They're building a Dyson sphere," she transmitted on emergency frequencies. "A stellar engineering project. They're going to encapsulate the entire star." The implications hit the remaining Council forces like a physical blow. Dyson spheres were theoretical constructs from the earliest days of galactic civilization, massive structures designed to capture a star's entire energy output. No species had ever attempted to build one, partly because of the enormous technical challenges, but mostly because the energy output of a single star was more than any known civilization could use. The humans apparently had uses for that much energy. As the stellar framework expanded, smaller human vessels began approaching the scattered council ships. But, instead of attacking, they broadcast a message that the translation systems struggled to process. Council vessels, you are ordered to surrender immediately. Any ship that powers down its weapons and transmits a surrender signal will be boarded and its crew taken prisoner according to the Geneva Conventions. Any ship that continues hostile action will be destroyed. Admiral Zefex had never heard of the Geneva Conventions, but the message's intent was clear. The humans were offering terms, not the total annihilation that Council doctrine would have demanded in similar circumstances. Sir, his aide reported, we're receiving surrender transmissions from multiple vessels. Captain Zirian of the battle cruiser Eternal Glory is requesting permission to stand down. The admiral faced the hardest decision of his military career. His every instinct demanded that he fight to the last ship, upholding the honor of the Council and his own warrior code. But he was also responsible for the lives of nearly 2 million crew members scattered across the surviving vessels. He studied the tactical display, looking for any advantage, any opportunity to strike a meaningful blow against the human fleet. What he saw crushed his remaining hope. The human ships weren't just numerous, they were impossible. Vessels that should have required the industrial output of entire star systems moved with casual precision. Their weapon systems were dark, not because they were unprepared for battle, but because they didn't consider the Council forces a significant enough threat to warrant powered weapons. Open a communication channel to the human fleet, Admiral Zefex ordered quietly. The response came immediately, as if the humans had been waiting for his call. The face that appeared on his display was surprisingly ordinary, a middle-aged human female with graying hair and tired eyes. She wore what appeared to be a simple uniform with no visible rank insignia. Admiral Zefex, she said, and her use of his name sent chills through his exoskeleton. I am Fleet Commander Elizabeth Santos of the Human Colonial Defense Force. I'm authorized to accept your surrender. Commander Santos, the Admiral replied, falling back on diplomatic protocols that seemed absurdly inadequate for the situation. I must protest the unprovoked attack on Council forces and the violation of sovereign space. The human's expression didn't change. Admiral, you declared war on humanity when you quarantined our system and attempted to prevent our natural expansion. You confirmed that state of war when you assembled a fleet with planet-killer weapons and moved it against our territory. We are simply responding to your aggression. Planet-killer weapons are used only as a last resort against existential threats, Admiral Zefex protested. Yes, Commander Santos agreed. And you considered a single-star system an existential threat to your entire galactic civilization. That tells us everything we need to know about your intentions toward humanity. The logic was inescapable, and Admiral Zefex felt his arguments crumble. The Council had indeed treated humanity as a threat requiring extinction, and now they were facing the consequences of that decision. What are your terms? He asked. Immediate cessation of all military action against human forces. Full withdrawal of Council vessels from territories claimed by humanity. Formal recognition of human sovereignty over all systems we currently occupy or may occupy in the future. The demands were essentially a complete capitulation. The Admiral's military training rebelled against such terms, but the strategic reality was undeniable. The Council had lost this war before the first shot was fired. I lack the authority to speak for the entire Council, he admitted. Commander Santos nodded. We understand. That's why we've sent diplomatic missions to 47 different homeworlds. They'll be presenting identical terms to your respective governments. You have 72 hours to comply. The transmission ended, leaving Admiral Zefex staring at a blank screen. Around him, his remaining crew worked frantically to re-establish contact with Council leadership, but the quantum communication network remained frustratingly unreliable. What they didn't know was that human diplomatic missions had indeed arrived at every Council homeworld simultaneously. But these weren't traditional diplomatic vessels seeking negotiation. They were massive fleets, each one larger than the force that had just humiliated the Council's finest military units. The message was unmistakable. Humanity wasn't asking for recognition. They were announcing it. As Admiral Zefex began transmitting surrender orders to his scattered fleet, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The humans had demonstrated technical capabilities that bordered on the magical, organizational skills that allowed them to coordinate operations across hundreds of star systems, and strategic thinking that had outmaneuvered galactic civilization's finest minds. But, more than that, they had shown something that chilled him to his crystalline core: restraint. They could have annihilated every council vessel without effort, yet they had chosen to accept surrender. They could have demanded unconditional submission, yet they were offering what appeared to be reasonable terms. The humans weren't just militarily superior. They were playing a game with rules that the council didn't understand, working toward objectives that remained mysterious. As the last council vessel powered down its weapons and transmitted surrender codes, Admiral Zefex realized that galactic civilization was about to learn what it meant to share the universe with a species that viewed war not as a last resort, but as just another tool for achieving their goals. The question that would haunt his dreams for the rest of his life was simple: what were humanity's goals? And what would they do now that they had proven themselves unstoppable? 3 months after the surrender at Kepler 442, the galaxy had been fundamentally transformed. The Galactic Council, an institution that had governed interstellar civilization for 3 millennia, found itself reduced to a ceremonial body whose primary function was implementing humanity's expanding influence. Dr. Sarah Chun stood in the observation deck of the newly constructed diplomatic station orbiting the former council homeworld of Zirion Prime. Through the transparent aluminum viewport, she could see human construction vessels working alongside alien craft to build what would become the galaxy's new capital, a massive space station designed to accommodate representatives from all 47 species. The integration is proceeding faster than our most optimistic projections, reported Ambassador Marcus Webb, reviewing data on his tablet. 17 species have already requested full technological exchange agreements. 23 more are negotiating limited partnerships. Sarah nodded, but her expression remained thoughtful. And the remaining 7? The Hegemon Collective is maintaining their isolationist stance, but they're not actively opposing us. The Void Dancers have retreated to their dimensional refuges. The other 5 are still processing what happened. What had happened was something unprecedented in galactic history. Instead of the conquest and subjugation that most species expected, humanity had offered partnership. The terms were straightforward. Any species that recognized human sovereignty and agreed to peaceful coexistence would gain access to human technology and protection. Those that preferred independence could maintain it, as long as they didn't interfere with human expansion. The results had surprised everyone, including humanity's leadership. Dr. Chun, came a voice from behind them. Sarah turned to see Counselor Threx approaching, his ancient frame supported by a mobility device of obviously human design. The old politician had become something of a bridge between the former council leadership and humanity's diplomatic corps. Counselor, Sarah greeted him respectfully. How are the integration talks proceeding? Better than I feared, worse than I hoped, the ancient being replied with what might have been a smile. The younger species are adapting remarkably well. They see the advantages of human technology and don't carry the baggage of remembering when the council was truly powerful. But the older civilizations. He gestured toward the displays showing various worlds throughout the galaxy. Some showed the signs of rapid technological advancement as human knowledge was shared freely. Others remained unchanged, their inhabitants struggling to accept that their ancient way of life had become obsolete overnight. They remember when we were the ones making decisions for the galaxy, Threx continued. It's difficult to accept that we've been superseded. Sarah's expression softened. Counselor, humanity never intended to replace the council entirely. We're hoping to work with established institutions, not destroy them. Perhaps, Threx replied. But intentions and results are often different things. Tell me, Dr. Chun, what does humanity ultimately want? Your expansion shows no signs of slowing. Your technology advances at rates that make our scientists dizzy. You could conquer every star system in the galaxy within a decade if you chose to. It was the question that kept galactic leaders awake at night. Human fleets continued to spread outward from Sol, establishing colonies and industrial facilities at an unprecedented pace. Dyson spheres were under construction around dozens of stars. Entire stellar systems were being converted into massive shipyards and research facilities. "We want what we've always wanted," Sarah replied quietly. "Room to grow, freedom to explore, the chance to build something better than what came before. And if other species stand in your way?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment, watching human and alien workers cooperating on the construction project below. "Counselor, are you familiar with human history?" "Some of it. Your people have an extensive record of conflict." "We do. But we also have a record of something else, absorption. When two human cultures met, they didn't usually destroy each other. They traded, learned, adapted. The stronger culture influenced the weaker, but both were changed in the process." She turned to face the ancient politician directly. "Humanity doesn't want to rule the galaxy the way the Council did. We want to transform it. Every species that joins us freely makes us stronger, brings us new perspectives, new capabilities we couldn't develop alone. And those who refuse to join, then they get left behind. But they don't get destroyed unless they force us to destroy them." It was a subtle but crucial distinction. The Council had maintained order through careful balance and negotiated compromises. Humanity offered advancement through integration or irrelevance through isolation. It was a choice that most species found surprisingly easy to make. Ambassador Webb's tablet chimed with an urgent message. "Dr. Chun, we're receiving a priority communication from the Andromeda expedition." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. The Andromeda expedition was humanity's most ambitious project yet, a massive fleet sent to establish humanity's first foothold in a neighboring galaxy. The journey should have taken them another 6 months. "Put it through," she ordered. The holographic display activated, showing the face of Admiral Jessica Park, commander of the expedition fleet. Behind her, Sarah could see the bustle of a command center in full operation. "Dr. Chun," Admiral Park began without preamble, "we've made contact with extragalactic civilizations. And we have a problem." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. Humanity had barely finished integrating one galaxy, and now they were facing the prospect of contact with entirely alien civilizations from beyond the galactic rim. "What kind of problem, Admiral?" Ambassador Webb asked. "They've been watching us," Park replied grimly. "The civilizations in Andromeda have been monitoring our expansion since we broke the Council's quarantine. They're not impressed with how we handled things." Counselor Threx leaned forward with obvious interest. "Are they hostile?" "Unknown. They've agreed to a diplomatic meeting, but they're demanding that representatives from the old Council be present. They claim that humanity's methods violate some sort of intergalactic treaty that we've never heard of." Sarah felt pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. "Admiral, can you describe these civilizations? Their technology level, organizational structure?" "They call themselves the Gardner Collective. Near as we can tell, they're responsible for managing the development of multiple galaxies. They say the Council was one of their projects." The silence that followed was profound. Counselor Threx's ancient frame seemed to sag as the implications sank in. The Galactic Council hadn't been the pinnacle of interstellar civilization. It had been a carefully managed experiment conducted by beings whose scope of operation spanned multiple galaxies. "Dr. Chun," Admiral Park continued, "they want to meet with humanity's leadership. All of it. They're particularly interested in speaking with whoever authorized the use of what they call civilization disruption protocols." Sarah exchanged glances with Ambassador Webb. Humanity had developed their galaxy-spanning strategies through careful analysis and creative adaptation. The idea that they had inadvertently stumbled into technologies or methods used by intergalactic civilizations was both fascinating and terrifying. "Set up the meeting, Admiral," Sarah ordered. "Full diplomatic protocols. And Admiral, start preparing defensive plans. If these gardeners consider humanity a threat to their experiments, we need to be ready for another war." "Already in progress, Dr. Chun. But based on what we've seen of their capabilities, this won't be like fighting the Council." As the transmission ended, Sarah found herself staring out at the stars with a mixture of excitement and dread. Humanity had spent months believing they had achieved something unprecedented, the peaceful conquest of an entire galaxy. Now they were learning that they might have simply graduated from one level of cosmic politics to another. "Counselor Threx," she said quietly, You mentioned that the older civilizations remember when the Council was truly powerful. How powerful were they, really? Before humanity arrived, the ancient being was quiet for a long moment. Dr. Chun, I think you're about to find out that what you accomplished wasn't defeating galactic civilization. It was passing a test. What kind of test? The kind that determines whether a species is ready to learn about the universe beyond their galaxy. Through the viewport, the stars that had once seemed like humanity's ultimate frontier now looked like merely the first step in a journey that would span scales they had never imagined. The galaxy they had conquered was just the beginning. Somewhere in the void between galaxies, ancient intelligences were deciding whether humanity deserved to survive their graduation to the next level of cosmic civilization. The forbidden button had been pressed, the galactic order had fallen, and humanity had proven itself capable of rewriting the rules of interstellar politics. Now they were about to discover what happened when you caught the attention of those who wrote the rules for the universe itself. In the depths of space, construction continued on projects whose true purpose would soon become clear. Humanity had always believed they were building for their own expansion. They were about to learn they had been preparing for something much larger. The real test was just beginning.